At the age of 22 years old, on December 26, 1944, Japanese intelligence officer Hiro Onoda was deployed in Lubang Island in the Philippines. His orders from his commanding officers, Major Yoshima Taniguchi, were simple. Whatever happens, we'll come back for you. Until then, so long as you have one soldier, you are to continue to lead him. Under no circumstances are you to give up your life voluntarily. Not long after, on February 28, 1945, Allied forces overran the island. When this happened, the remaining Japanese soldiers split up into small groups of 3 or 4 and headed into the jungle. Most of these small groups were quickly killed off or surrendered. Onoda's group, however, did not. They continued to use guerrilla warfare tactics to harry the enemy troops as best they could and gather as much intelligence as they could. 29 years later, only Onoda remained. In the interim, attempts were made to convince them that the war was over, but all efforts were rejected as a trick by the enemy. After all, Japan could not have lost and thus eventually would retake the island. Finally, in 1974, a college student, Neryo Suzuki, decided to travel the world. Among his list of things to do on his journey was to find, to quote, Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman. Shockingly, where countless others failed, he succeeded. Onoda, however, still refused to believe the war had ended and Japan had lost until his commanding officers told him so. Thus, Major Taniguchi was located and sent to the island. And so it was that on March 10th, 1975, at the age of 52 years old, Onoda, in full uniform that was somehow still immaculately kept, marched out of the jungle and surrendered his samurai sword to the Philippine president, Ferdinand Marcos. Unfortunately for everyone, during his time in the jungle, Onoda had killed over 30 Filipinos, injured over 100 others, destroyed crops, and more, continuing to fight the war as he was ordered. Nevertheless, Marcos pardoned Onoda for his crimes. From there, Onoda went on to become a farmer and later a survival instructor, living to the ripe old age of 91, dying on January 16, 2014.